Welcome to the second week of Hazardous Waste and Public Law. This week we're going to build upon the first week in our study of the U.S. codes and regulations, in particular and how they apply to the two major environmental laws, RCRA and CERCLA. Your textbook will cover these two laws in much greater detail, but what we're going to do now is give you a thumbnail sketch or an overview of each of these laws. At the risk of appearing to be one slide on everything you wanted to know about RCRA, the following slide is a good overview of the basics that you'll need to know to understand RCRA. The key points to realize are that RCRA had a definite beginning in 1976, but it also came out of something that pre-existed that, the Solid Waste Disposal Act. In addition, over time, the RCRA rules, the Hazardous Waste and Solid Waste Amendments, were used to update RCRA to make it more current and more responsive to current activities. RCRA covers the permitting and tracking system, identification of solid and hazardous wastes, and the design and performance standards for treatment, storage, and disposal facilities. Lots of very big topics which we're going to go into in more detail in the remaining weeks. Key items are that the RCRA laws are in 42 United States Code, sections 6901 to 6987, but maybe more important for the working professional is Title 40 of the Code of Federal Regulations, Part 261, covers the identification and listing of hazardous waste. This is one of the most often used sections of RCRA law for the working professional. Paralleling RCRA, we have the CERCLA law, and CERCLA also had a definite beginning in 1980, but we mentioned the history of the Love Canal in week 1, so you understand the which brought about the CERCLA laws. CERCLA has been amended with the Superfund Amendments and Reauthorization Act in 1986. You will hear SARA mentioned a fair amount, and the purpose of this law is for remediation, and it's to impose liability for past actions that have current effects. There's a financial aspect of this, and a super fund is created to collect monies to pay for these activities, and you'll often hear Superfund mentioned as a synonym for CERCLA. The statutory background is in 42 United States Code, sections 9601 through 9662. A couple things to consider as we study the larger name brand laws like RCRA and CERCLA are that the Constitution of the United States actually limits the federal government to those powers specifically granted in the Constitution, and therefore the states actually retain the general authority to enact environmental regulations pertaining to the safety, health, and welfare of their citizens. So you have to understand there's a federal system and a state system. RCRA and CERCLA would be examples of federal law that once passed would be applicable and enforceable on the states. However, there are a couple different sources of constitutional limits on state actions. The first one is the Commerce Clause. Federal regulation under the Commerce Clause may preempt state regulation if the federal regulation leaves no room for the state regulation, or if there is a dominant federal interest, or if the state regulation conflicts with the federal regulation. The second area would be the Takings Clause. The Fifth Amendment provides the federal government shall not take private property for public use without just compensation. The U.S. Constitution, Amendment 5. This prohibition is applicable to states and local governments under the 14th Amendment. So as we go through the remainder of the class, please try to consider whether a law is a federal law, a state law, a federal law applicable to the states? Who's really in control? And who audits whom? The state may regulate the law, but possibly the EPA has to come in and approve the state actions. As a result of this federal-state dichotomy, you may find in different states we have different words describing the exact same thing. In some states, hazardous waste may be called hazardous waste, or it may be called dangerous waste. The difference is immaterial because actually the definition is the same, but there are state differences. In addition, you may have generators that are either conditionally exempt, small or large generators, and go to the next state and find it either small, medium, or large generators. The same three categories apply, but there may be state differences in the implementation of federal laws.